Welcome to SpreadLove in Organizations, the healthcare leadership podcast where we explore leadership with purpose. I'm Naji, your host, joined today by Jason Bhardwaj, an experienced life science executive with a broad background leading in startups and 20 years working in healthcare. Currently, Jason is the CEO of Nova Anchora, developing a recombinant protein-based treatment for DEB, dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa. Prior to this, Jason served for 6 years as CEO of another dermatology-focused biotech. Jason has led or advised across a wide range of technologies as well as indications in healthcare. Prior to life sciences startups, Jason studied biomedical engineering at Duke, received a master's degree in business from Harvard, and developed a decade of foundational experience in consulting, working with some of the largest healthcare innovators on a full functional suite of critical challenges. Jason and his family are my neighbors here in Newton, Massachusetts, where he is involved in the community as a soccer coach, marathon runner, and most recently via a bid for the school committee. Jason, it's so good to see you again and have you with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I'd love first to hear more about your personal story. What's behind the lines of your journey from biomedical engineering to consulting and now being a CEO of a biotech?
Thanks. Yeah, where to begin? I mean, I think healthcare and science have been a theme for me for a very, very long time. I think both by natural affinity, but both my parents studied engineering. My mom was a mechanical engineer. She studied at Rice, is where she met my dad, who was a PhD in material science there. And so I think that there was an infusion of that, scientific thinking into our house. Like we had the whiteboard above the dining room, and my dad would give us lectures when he came home, like that type of thing. So that's definitely the environment. And so, I think there was a number. I loved chemistry. That was probably my favorite subject in high school. And then when I got to thinking about undergraduate institutions, et cetera, Duke was really on my radar for biomedical engineering. And something had started to click for me at that stage around biology, life sciences, and medicine, and all of those things at that naive stage for me were kind of on the table, and it felt like a good place to go and kind of figure it out. And so that was an important juncture for me, and I did think about pursuing medicine, and not really sure I had a great framework at that stage in my life for making the decision, but decided, no, I wanted to point more towards an intersection of business and science. And so I studied biomedical engineering and economics. Some institutions don't have a quote unquote vocational business program. So that was my way of sort of doing that intersection academically, as they were. And then strategy consulting was meant to be like sort of a few-year gig to figure out where to land in the healthcare ecosystem. And I loved it, and it ended up being more like a decade. But I always did have that sort of, I want to build something type of an itch. And I did feel like the learning was there, and I just loved the people where I was working at Bain. And so, that's what kept me there for ultimately at bookends a full decade. And finally, it was one of these, like, if I don't push myself out of the nest now, like, when is it going to ever happen? And so started doing smaller healthcare, ultimately life science focused startups. And now it's been a decade of doing that, and I've just loved it. And I wouldn't go back, but the training and the exposure was really fantastic.
Well, thanks for sharing, Jason. What's your biggest learning? As you said, now you've been on a decade building team, building biotech, being the CEO. What is your biggest learning through the past years of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many learnings. I mean, maybe to this, discussion we were just having of finding your path and what is it that you want to do. I think there's something to life science startups, or building a project from early stages that for me personally, and I think everyone has their own personal index for gratification, satisfaction, et cetera. but the wins feel really big when you start at these stages and you bring something from, you remember when it was sketch on a napkin-ish. And so when you get the milestones like IND moving forward into clinic, or a successful readout from a clinical study, or anything in between, they feel really big. And so that personally for me has been a real learning of find your place in the ecosystem that has that right balance of effort and gratification. And look, there are losses too, and you feel those too, and you have to be able to make that kind of arc work for you personally. And I get why some people prefer a different, portfolio approach or something like that. But for me, that was a big learning, is find your place in the ecosystem where you can add value. And it really is a personal fit for how you derive satisfaction.
And it certainly is, as you said, humbling and gratifying at the same time. As you know, like this is something I also do. And as you were speaking, like each one of those milestones is so important and so big. And at the end of the day, you're bringing hope and hopefully a new medicine to patients as each one of those milestones is hit. And as you take this molecule from a piece of paper and to the bench, preclinical and all those phases, as we both know. From that experience, as you said, like building a project, building a company, I'd love to hear more about your people experience while building those companies. How do you think about building a team in a biotech to develop those breakthrough medications?
Yeah. The projects that I've worked on have been at the stage and scale as independent startups that we've had a very virtual model. And so I think it really, in that model, it really amplifies the importance of what you're just describing, of people decisions. And so both of these companies, the team I'm building now, and we've just started hiring the core team. And then the last company, single digit size core teams. And as anyone who's in the space knows, then you have a sort of portfolio of advisors, contractors, and other folks getting involved, CROs, et cetera, to augment that. And so, I've, on both fronts, the sort of core team and the folks that you build around that, in that type of a setting, the people decisions are so important. Because if you have a sort of a weak leg of the stool, so to speak, or you really feel that, especially as a leader, you end up spending, when there are weak legs of the stool, you end up spending way too much time supporting the leg instead of kind of overall strategy and moving things forward. And so that I think is the key lesson, especially when you're architected that way, that the core is really important. And then similarly, though, I think really making sure that you have the right partners. And for that, again, it's a little bit like placing the ecosystem dependent. There are partners who are really high capability that are not geared to work with smaller stage startup entrepreneurs. And so really, depending on the type of partnership, et cetera, like having a sense of what your criteria are and making those decisions appropriately are really important as well. If you commit to a CRO for your key study and you just find that they aren't nimble enough for the particular areas of your disease state or recruiting or organizing the sites, it can be really, really painful to sort of switch gears.
So I want to ask one more question about the core team. As you said, like it's hard to build a core team, hard to hire the right people. So how do you think about this as you're hiring? Is there like one philosophy that you have throughout the past decade on hiring the winning team to help you build the biotech that you're building?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that. I mean, the one philosophy, it's been so situational. I'll just give the example of just having hired our first team member for a new team. For us right now, manufacturing is the key. And so, I think the framework, and we were, maybe it's a positive time to be hiring in the market, but we had some really great candidates. And so, really trying for that particular linchpin role for us, balancing the sort of, the program management hat, because there's so many resources this role is going to need to direct, versus the thought leadership component, which is really, do they have the requisite detailed expertise in the functional areas that really, really matter? For us, it was downstream, in particular, development for CMC of a recombinant protein. That what I do sort of ascribe to is that aphorism of, if you hire a B player, they hire C players. So we really, really, I put an inordinate amount of time on the hiring process. If there's a rule there, it's like anytime I feel like I'm spending way too much time on the process or number of candidates, or orchestrating what my questions are in the interview versus my academic collaborator versus our CMC advisor. We put a ton of time and effort into that. I'm glad we did. You know what I mean? Like, the returns felt. So I don't know that there was really like a philosophy as much as making those investments to really have as high quality a process as you can, and being very clear on what the particularities of that particular role are to make sure the person is set up to be the linchpin we need them to be, I think was really key.
Another area you're passionate about, Jason, and as you were talking about your dad giving lectures, it reminded me probably of something you are working on currently. You're passionate about community and education too. And this is something you said from your very early beginning you've been very passionate about. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work and involvement there too? Because I feel everything is kind of interlinked at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, let me first address the analogy and then the specifics. So, I really do think that whatever it is, a sort of learning mindset is so key to, especially in our role and frame of work. I mean, this is not producing widgets. There's so much art and high-minded science in what we're doing, and uncertainty. And so there is a lot of, we're students in life sciences, absolutely. Yes, I do have, as you alluded to in the introduction, a new side project, which is school committee bid here in Newton, Massachusetts. And, I think there's a lot of motivations for that. The biggest, of course, is having 2 elementary school kids, and then which I'm going to need my parents share that, and so that's the skin in the game. But I think yes, there's a lot of family history, not only what I mentioned with the lectures at dinner, but my grandmother was an elementary school teacher and then principal. My mother went into teaching later in her career, English as a second language. My brother's in pre-kindergarten education, and I didn't pursue those paths, but I do have a little bit of the bug, and so this maybe felt like a way to scratch an itch, I guess. Not just that being involved in education, but sort of giving back in some mission-oriented way. It sort of kind of coalesced for me. And yeah, I was in between roles and had already been involved both in the community as a coach and in other ways, a room parent and involved in the schools, but really started volunteering and signing up for whatever I could. And a buddy of mine was like, I think I was, philosophizing or on a soapbox about an issue, and it was like, you should run for school committee. And my initial reaction was, that's crazy, but it sort of started a process that's led to a few weeks ago formally announcing, and have wonderful support from other parents in the community who are helping me. So I've learned so much. Think about ways to learn. I've learned so much about schooling and the history of Newton, which is a very, very rich history of education, and the twists and turns that have led us to where we are today. And I think it's an exciting time to get involved. So yeah, it's a long wind up for an election in November of next year. But yeah, I'll be running for my ward, Ward 3, which every ward in Newton has a rep. There are 8, and the entire town votes. So it's that's a totally new educational experience for me as well, the political one.
But this is great, and having an impact early on. I know we talked a lot about curriculum, how this is done, and being involved in the community and the education piece. I know you're big on STEAM, obviously. Like this is great to see this involvement from you and what you're trying to achieve for our community. Obviously, I'm biased. My kids are also in the Newton Public School, so this is something also very close to my heart, and it's great to see people like you helping out with the educational system. I would love now to move to a section where I'm going to give you a word, and I would love your first reaction to it.
Great.
So the first one is leadership.
Yeah, leadership. I think my reaction is it is so multifaceted, and it means so many different things. So we all can be leaders, but just finding a way to have an impact, to collaborate, to have an idea and move it forward. I mean, that's leadership.
What about biotech?
Biotech. I think biotech it just jumps off the page as exciting science and a way to help people. We have so many unsolved problems in the world medically, and it's really just moving forward so fast now. I just find so much constant excitement from hearing what's happening in the ecosystem.
The third one is about education, STEAM.
Yes. STEAM gets talked about the most with gender imbalances, et cetera. But to me, I think that connects to me with just excitement. Science and math and engineering. I mean, obviously, these were what drove a lot of my academic interests, et cetera. But I think they shouldn't be esoteric. They should be approachable and fun and dynamic. And that's how the school system should continue to approach them. And yes, find ways to broaden it to make sure it's accessible to everyone of all segments. I think, especially here in Boston, it's easy to say that. I mean, we're such a mecca for STEAM-based careers, and so why not make sure we're providing the best seeding ground for the future innovators.
What about SpreadLove and organizations?
Yes, well, SpreadLove, I've now become more acquainted, and I think the name is beautiful. And I think spreading insights and connecting with people who are passionate about what they do is what an amazing way to spread the love. So I'm very honored to be a part of the volume of cool insights and learnings.
Any final word of wisdom, Jason, for leaders around the world?
I think there's so many different ways to go out and be a leader and make a difference, back to my comments on the versatility of leadership. And so I think finding that way you want to make an impact, perhaps that's attuned to, like we were saying, your emotional profile and where you are most excited about making a difference. I think that's where, in my opinion, folks of abilities in all different spheres will have their greatest impact, because you really, like, if you've got energy for something, that's where it's going to jump off the page. And I certainly feel that way with biotech and in my current line of work. But maybe just bridging briefly back over to the school stuff. I mean, my wife noticed it with me. For me, it was the buddy was like, "Should you run for the school committee?" And I was sitting there in my bed at 11:30 at night, watching old school committee meetings on 1.5x, like on Newton TV. And it's like, man, I really have energy for this. It's not work. It's like it's fun. It's play, with a serious tone to that. And so I think finding that energy as you draw the arc of your career, I think is really fun and important, and will be ultimately how people find their greatest impact.
Yes, and how you framed it is so powerful. Find the way you want to make a difference, and there's no small difference, right? And this is what we're talking about here, the difference in your community, from education to healthcare, and obviously ultimately what you're doing in the biotech world, bringing innovations to patients. So thanks again for being with me today, sharing your experiences and also what all the impact that you're trying to bring across Newton and beyond. It's been a real pleasure to have you with me today, Jason. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Naji. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the show. For more episodes, make sure to subscribe to SpreadLoveIO.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Let's inspire change together and make a positive impact in healthcare, one story at a time.